Happy December, everyone. Welcome to Kaleidoscope, where we are positive, daring, different, and with lots of gifts to give you for Christmas. We spoke of gifts, didn't we? Embracing the spirit of the season at Cinnamon, discover indulgent festivities, heartfelt, cherished moments, and that's what Cinnamon City Hotels is giving you on the show. Very generous dinners for two at Plates Cinnamon Grand, flavoured at Cinnamon Red, and at the dining room at Cinnamon Lakeside. And there is more, a bumper hamper from Park Street Gourmet. All you have to do is inbox any of our platforms and with your name, contact number and address, and Santa may just be there for you on the 21st of December. To our partners, Srilanka Live, CDB The Daily Morning, Park Street Gourmet, Park Street Wines and Zip Zip, we couldn't have asked for better partners. Thank you. And now for a quick look at the week that was on CDB Snapshot. Sri Lanka is set to receive a staggered $600 million from the ADB after the IMF releases its second tranche of $2.9 billion. Sri Lanka's balance of payments remains at a surplus throughout the first 10 months of the year. Sri Lanka Tourism unveils its newest branding. You'll come back for more. Over 2,400 people sign up for COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai, nearly 4 times as much as last year. Singapore is the world's most expensive city for the 9th time in 11 years. And Oxford Dictionary's word of the year is rizz, the short form for charisma.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
Welcome to Srilanka Life News Capsule. The Sri Lanka government recently proposed a minimum room rate policy for hotels within the city of Colombo, which means hotels cannot offer rooms at rates below the policy directive. Advocata Institute did some research and the findings simply spelled out that this is not good for the tourism industry. CEO Dhananath Fernando spoke to me on Zoom. If we are looking at the scenario right now, what is the fundamental reason that Sri Lanka should not have a minimum room rate policy?
Minimum room rates will basically harm our tourism industry, because what we need to have is a competitive tourism industry. When you have a minimum room rate for especially in the Colombo city area, for tourism, actually it is not benefiting the tourist or the consumer, because then they know that there will be a room rate which was regulated by the government, and that means that they are selling it at a lower price, while actually the hotel providers are willing to sell the rooms at a lower price. So that may not reflect well on one side for the tourism industry. And secondly, basically, the tourism industry earns money not only by renting rooms. It is by all sorts of other supporting services like restaurants, selling of liquor, and so many other things, and service charges, laundry facilities, so many other things. So when you have basically a minimum room rate, you are excluding all that, because you are not allowing the guests to stay at the hotels at a lower rate, and then you can hoop up the other revenue from all sorts of other services that they use. So basically this policy will backfire, because we are basically losing the tourism revenue because of these room rates, and that's why we should not have a minimum room rate policy for the hotels.
Any idea why the minimum room rate was introduced in the first place, given that we have always enjoyed, for the most part, a floating price and been able to conquer that?
My view is because some of the small and medium scale hotels who are not very productive and efficient, they want to keep the room rates, because basically the 5-star hotels, during the off season, they are basically dropping down the room prices, so then they can attract more tourists. But when they drop down the room prices up to an extent, even the small and medium enterprises, like small and medium hotels, their room rates will be even higher than the star category. Some of the room rates is my view, the key hotel chain. So that may be the reason that I can think of. But only having it for Colombo city limits and in an era where we have Airbnb and Booking.com, I do not see any reason of value or rationale on having a minimum room rate policy.
What were your key findings in this report?
Basically, the room rates or the price controls in any sort will not work. It will basically distort the markets, and it will affect both the suppliers and the entire ecosystem. That's the main finding. We have done one report in 2016, even for the hotel industry. It's the same. When you have a room rate policy, basically it's doing greater harm than helping our tourism industry. And that's what exactly happening when you have that room rate policy. That's the main finding of our policy brief that we have done.
The old share price index at the Colombo Stock Exchange continued to falter, even as average daily turnover levels dipped below the 1 billion rupee level. Record crude oil production in the United States is keeping oil prices below $78 per barrel, even as OPEC Plus tries to push prices higher with production costs. Gold prices rose to an all-time high of $2,135 per ounce before dropping to $2,000 per ounce as the US currency steadied. Yo-Yo Ma released a song last month with drag queen Patagonia and indigenous trance musician Quinn Christopherson, with a glorious music video to go with it. The Pirali calendar is officially out. Here's some of my favorites from the timeless pieces. We may not know him face to face, but he's also familiar. One of the most beloved judges of MasterChef Australia, Chef Gary Mehigan. He's a renowned celebrity chef, and he was in Sri Lanka whipping up some amazing delectables at Cinnamon Grand Colombo. Having trained at the Connaught and Le Soufflé in London before moving to Australia, Chef Gary has headed kitchens in some of Melbourne's most prominent restaurants in his career. His signature style, as we all know, is positive encouragement, which is something we'd all like to hear and see in our kitchens. So let's find out a little bit more about Chef Gary, who I met at the London Grill at Cinnamon Grand, and he's on Let's Talk today. Gary, welcome to Sri Lanka. So was there anything you really wanted to do kitchen-wise, specifically in Sri Lanka, when it comes to the array of fresh produce and stuff?
Seafood. I mean, you know, it's hard to beat it. I mean, I was talking to Gayan, who's a Sri Lankan friend of mine, and he said, you know, you've got to use, you know, lagoon crab, the prawns, you know, the snapper, the tuna. He said it's limitless, and dried fish too. Like, you know, I think I'm going to be eating that rather than, you know, putting it on my menu. But yeah, I've got a fair sense of Sri Lankan cuisine, but not in its place. So, you know, my thinking is this: it's a bit like, I don't know, you want to eat a great pizza. You haven't really eaten a great pizza until you've sat on a little, you know, cobbled street in Naples and eaten it in its place. So this is what I'm looking forward to here. You know, so obviously I've had hoppers and, you know, pan rolls and, you know, great curries and great seafood dishes, but I want a bit of street food. I want a bit of home-cooked food. I'm already scrabbling around in the kitchen going, what's that? What's that? So, yeah.
Anything that piqued your interest when it comes to Sri Lankan cuisine?
The spicing is quite complex. So it's, for me, as a French chef, you know, because essentially I'm French trained, it's a bit like my love of Indian food. It's something that sometimes you feel like you have to be born with, you know, like that innate sense of subtlety or, you know, rip-roaring, you know, punch in the mouth. So I think, you know, if there's secrets to be learned, that's it for me. That's what I'm looking for. In terms of flavour combinations, it's, you know, even watching one of the young chefs today, he was just making a black chicken, and just watching how he's cooking the spice, even the smell of the spice and the fact they're all toasted. I think there was some ground roasted rice in there as well. So there's a lot of complexity. And for a chef like me that might use one or two spices, or even just use an aromatic like thyme or rosemary. One of the first recipes I was ever taught was a black pork by a good friend of mine. And that would have been 30 years ago. And that was the the spice mix he gave me. I still make the same mixture.
So being on MasterChef, I'm sure you've had your fair share of Sri Lankan dishes.
Sure.
What's your verdict?
I think what it is I'm attracted to dishes and cuisines that kind of are the antithesis of maybe the simplest of French dishes or Italian dishes, if that makes any sense. Like, you know, we'll take a cauliflower, we'll shred it, we'll cook it in milk, maybe with a little bit of garlic, but nothing else, drain it, puree it, and it's like a pure kind of flavour of cauliflower, nothing else. Give that to a Sri Lankan and they'll go, where's all the flavour? Like, where, you know, what else is going in it? You might pop a piece of fish on that and drizzle it with olive oil. And so it's, in a sense, it's a pure expression of the ingredient, but it doesn't have that complexity. And there are dishes that are complex, but I think the appeal of, say, dishes that are the antithesis of that piece of fish with olive oil are dishes like that black pork or the lamprey or things like this, where you know there's just so much going on. You know, like, what's the spice in that? How have they made that? You know, why does that taste like that?
You were speaking about MasterChef. Most of them are home cooks or they're professionals who would love to cook. What are some of the experiences that you would like to share, the insights that you gained from them?
Season 1 was a surprise for all of us because the contestants didn't know what to expect, and nor did we, nor did the producers, in fact. And what it turned into was a very supportive, positive television program around one of the great pleasures in life. You know, I always describe it as art and music as one of the things that draws us together and reminds us of how much we've got in common, rather than now, you know, in these times, particularly now, where it's so divisive. In that first season, probably for the first few months of filming, I was a little resistant to accepting that home cooks could teach me anything. Like, after all, I'd been a chef for 25 years, what are you going to teach me? But they've taught me more, I think, in a sense, than I've learned from many of even my peers. When you see a contestant make something that you've never made before, that's a thrill. Once you accept that, once you let that in, then the learning begins, and it's a two-way street.
So Sri Lankan cuisine, very unique. It's not Indian, it's not Vietnamese, it's not Malaysian. It has its own character. But we've never kind of made a space in the world with our cuisine. How do you suggest we market it?
It's not about marketing, it's about coming of age. And it's happened to every country. You know, people seem to assume that, you know, French food's always been brilliant or Italian food's been brilliant. It's not the case. You know, and don't forget, you know, in those countries, you know, great fine dining restaurants would have been exclusively for the rich. It wasn't until the 90s, maybe even the mid-90s, that, you know, food in Britain started to, you know, take a turn and rediscover its culinary heritage and start, you know, chefs like Marco Pierre White or Gordon Ramsay started popping their heads up, and they'd gone and trained, they'd gone off and they'd left England, not Marco, but, you know, many young chefs had left the UK and trained elsewhere in the world and then brought all of that experience back and then refined it or found their own passion and started these great restaurants. And it's happened everywhere. It's happened in the States, you know, it's happened in Australia, and all at different times, you know, and it'll happen here. It's those young chefs that then come back. You know, so you're exporting youth and enthusiasm, and at some point it'll all pile back in, and you bring all that experience back in with new ideas and a new vision.
So here's our Park Street Gourmet life in 60. We took a trip around Colombo to check out Christmas Fair, the cake mixing at Cinnamon Grand and Cinnamon Lakeside. Then we trotted to the Bay Leaf for some Christmas cheer, popped in at the delightful Young Minds Preschool Christmas concert, took in the white Christmas themed decor at the Hilton Colombo, and looked up at the lights as the street lit up at Park Street Mews. So things are looking rather celebratory this Christmas. Don't forget, Santa will come your way. Send your details in to us. We'll be back next week.